Hello and welcome back to Salesforce Hulk. In the previous video, we have understood about the wire decorator in LWC, and now in this video, we will understand more about the wire decorator and its alternative, which is the imperative approach. So let's get started. Let's first define wire and imperative approach. Apex method get called automatically only in these two situations: whenever the page loads and whenever the value of the property which is passed in wire changes. While in imperative approach, we fetch the data or can perform actions by calling the apex method when and wherever we need, like on page load, on button click, or on any user interaction. Now let's take a simple example. Imagine you have a smart lighting system installed in your home. So whenever you enters the room, light automatically turns on. Also, it's automatically get dimmer when it's darker outside or when it's night time. So that is a wire approach where apex method get automatically called in these two situations which I have already specified. Taking the similar analogy for imperative approach, now instead of relying on the automated response, you manually control the lights whenever you want to. For example, if you want to turn on the light in the room, you use a switch or a mobile app to do so. Similarly, if you want to dim the lights for the movie night, you adjust them manually using a dimmer switch or an app. That's what an imperative approach is, where we call apex method on any user interaction wherever and whenever we want to. So let's see how to implement imperative approach practically. So here on the screen you can see one tab, high revenue accounts using imperative approach. This is the component which I have created using a basic code. So in this component you can see there is an input box which is where we need to specify the number of records, and here you can see some of the records are already shown on this particular screen. If I'll refresh, so whenever I'll refresh the component you can see let's see here, yeah, you can see initially we are getting some records, and if I'll write down, specify some number on this inside this input, like I am specifying 1, so I'm getting only one single record which is having the highest revenue. And if I'll specify 2, accordingly I'm getting 2. If I'm specifying 32, then accordingly the records are coming over here. So according to the number of records I am specifying in the input, I am getting the records. And now how this whole process is happening, this is happening with the implementation, with the help of the implementation of imperative approach. Through imperative approach, we are calling the apex method whenever we need. So let me show you that in the code. So if I'll go to this, here is the component which I have created, high revenue accounts using imperative approach. This is the component. Inside this, yeah, this is a normal HTML which consists of one input box, and then we are simply traversing over a list accounts to display. This is a property which I have created in the JavaScript. I'll show you in some time. Then we have this lightning card within the template for each, which is getting iterated again and again, and we are getting this kind of output like number of input and then the account name and account revenue amount, account name and account revenue amount, again and again it's showing up. So that's about the HTML part. Now if I'll show you the JavaScript, inside the JavaScript we have used imperative to call the apex method. So first of all, in the second line we are simply importing the apex method, which is get high revenue account records. This apex method I have already defined. Inside this apex method, if I'll show you, we have defined in this way, like we have written here a query which is fetching the records of account object, which is ordered by annual revenue in descending order. And here I am using the count variable. This count variable we are getting from the parameter. This parameter is of integer type. So this is the method which I have created here in this imperative approach, right? And in imperative approach, one thing to tell you that in imperative approach, it is not compulsory to use cacheable equals true, and even it is not a best practice to use cacheable equals true when we are using any DML operation within the Apex controller method. This particular method, if inside this method we are doing any DML operation, then it's not a good practice to use cacheable equals true here. I am using it over here because it doesn't matter in this case, because I am simply querying the records. So that's about the Apex controller, Apex method. I've already explained about this in the previous video as well, this whole Apex controller. Now let's move ahead and understand the JavaScript part of this LWC component. Within this component, you can see I have created two properties. So the first property is accounts to display, which I have initialized with an empty array. So you have to note this point, that whenever you are creating any property within an LWC component, make sure you define, you initialize that property with something like empty array, empty object, or a number, or a default value. The reason is, if you are using that property directly in your code, then it can give an error of undefined, or undefined, like the property is undefined, cannot access the value of the undefined variable. So something like this can occur. So to avoid that, you can give them, especially arrays and objects, you can initialize the properties with empty array and empty object if those properties are going to store array or object. Now moving ahead, here you can see there is a connected callback method. Now you know this from our LWC video, one of the LWC video where we have taught you about lightning lifecycle hooks. So this is one of the lifecycle hook which we are using in this case. The reason of using it, because as you can see over the screen, when I am refreshing the page, I am displaying some records over it. Now for getting these records, there is a need to call Apex method within at the time the page loads. So that is where there is a need of this connected callback lifecycle hook, because this connected callback lifecycle hooks get called whenever the page loads, whenever the component load, if you remember, right? So connected callback, within the connected callback, what we are doing, we are using an imperative approach here. Which approach? Imperative approach. Now what is an imperative approach is? Imperative approach is an approach where we directly call the Apex method. So you can see here, I am directly calling the Apex method which I have imported in the second line, right? So I am directly calling it. Now here in this, I am passing something like this object I am passing. Why I am passing this object? The reason is very simple. As you can see again, the account controller class, within this class the method is defined with a parameter, which is count parameter. Now, so obviously when we are calling this Apex method from the LWC component, we have to pass the parameter. And one point here to note, that this particular parameter is having this count key. It must be exactly same as the method parameter. Both the names should be exactly same. Now after that, after specifying the key and value, key is the parameter itself and the value is the property which we have created in the 6th line. You can see count of records. Now after this, we are using this approach, dot then. Now what is this dot then and why we use dot then kind of approach? So this syntax is basically used whenever we are calling or we are doing some work which takes time, right? More than expected. So in those cases we use dot then. In JavaScript language, this is a part of or a concept of JavaScript itself, where whenever it's like calling an Apex, an API, an external system, or using calling a complex method which takes time to execute, in those situations, the method which we are calling returns a promise. So that promise we need to handle. We need to wait for some time and then we need to execute. After getting the response, we need to execute the piece of code. So that is the same job happening over here. What is going on over here? That we are using this syntax. We are simply calling the apex method using this syntax, and as we are calling an apex method which is a part of backend, we'll be getting response in some time. So after getting the response, we need to assign that response to like this property accounts to display. So we need to wait till that time. So for that we are using .then. This is something which we are using. So what .then will do? .then will separate that portion of code, this portion of code, these two lines, from the rest of the other code, and it will wait till the response comes. When the response comes, then immediately it will execute these two lines. So then we'll be able to see the response over the screen as we are already seeing, right? So I'll show you here how it's working. Let me open the console so that you can see the console as well. We had done the console over here. Like whenever we'll be getting the response, we are consoling response using imperative approach, right? Let me keep it 1 so that you will not get confused, because the same kind of console I am using in the below code here. So yeah, here I have deployed it and refreshing it again. Yeah, so you can see initially we are getting the records because connected callback get called. And in the connected callback, we have used imperative approach, which is directly calling the apex method. So we are calling the apex method, and once the we are receiving the response, then these two lines will get executed, right? So you can see here we're getting the response using imperative approach 1. That is what we have consoled over here. And what is the response we are getting? This is the kind of response we are getting. Right? In wire, we get a response in the form of an object which is having two properties, data and error, but that is not the case here. Here we get directly the whole response, which is returned from the apex method. So these are all the records: annual revenue, ID, name, all the 5 records. Initially, as we have set here, the count of record is 5. Yeah, that's it. Simple. Connected callback is calling the apex method using imperative approach, and we're getting the response. In case of error will be handled by .catch, and that will get printed or consoled. Now let's move ahead with another functionality which this component is doing. So here, if I am writing some number like 1, then automatically you can see over here, automatically I am getting only single record. If I am changing it to 3, then automatically I am getting 3 records. So how it is happening, let's understand. Here in the code, in the HTML, we have this input element, right? In this input element, we are entering the number. So whenever we are entering the number, this event is getting triggered. Which event? On key up. So whenever I am typing, I press the value like 1, you can see 1, then nothing is happening. When I am pressing 1, then nothing is happening. But the time I'll key up, then automatically I'll be getting the response. So what is happening? On key up, this method is getting called set count. Now what is this method is doing? Let's understand in the JavaScript file. Set count. In set count, we have a specified event. This is a by default property of website or any web page. Whenever we interact with any element, we get the event property defined. In this event property, we get all the information related to that particular element and the event which is triggered. So from this event property, we are simply getting the target, and from the target means this input element. From the target, we are getting the value of the value attribute which is there in this, right, which can be defined, or which is the part of this lightning input element itself. So what we are doing is we are getting the value from the target using event variable, or I can say property. So you can see now I'll show you the console again. I'll clear the console. I'll type down something over here. So you can see value and there is nothing coming over here. The reason being, so value and then there is empty because the input is empty right now, you can see. Now, why the rest of the code, like the UI haven't got changed? Because the below lines of code is not executing. Why it is not executing? See, let's understand line by line. First of all, in the line 1, we are consoling it. It's consoling like value and then empty string. Then we are storing the event.target.value into a variable input value. That's very simple. Now after that, we are comparing, we are checking if this input value variable is an empty string or not. If it is, then we are simply ending the function here. We are returning, right? So that's why the rest of the lines, the below lines, these lines are not executing in case the input is empty. Now the time I'll change it to 3, you can see value equals 3 got printed, and then you can see the below lines also got executed, right? So we got the, like, we have updated this count, this dot count of records property with the input value, and then we have simply used imperative approach. As you know, we have already defined the imperative approach, that through this approach we can call apex method when and wherever we need. This is not a good practice to repeat again and again same kind of code, but I have written it so to make you understand that we can call imperative apex method using imperative approach whenever we need. Like here I am calling this apex method, simply passing the parameter with the value, and then we are getting the response. We are assigning that response, which is list of records, into this accounts to display property, and that is reflecting in the UI. So that is about the imperative approach. Now let's understand how we can do the same things using the wire approach, so that we can compare both of them, like how imperative works and how wire works and what exactly the difference between them. So here is the same component which I have created in the previous video. I have made some changes in this components. Let's see first of all the UI part, the functionality part. So let me go to the high revenue accounts tab, which we had created in the last video. High revenue accounts tab, you can see it is something different because I have made some changes. The similar changes I have made, like the HTML portion in this file, is same as the imperative component one, right? This is the template, this is lightning card within which there is an input, and then there is a template for each, which is traversing on this accounts to display property, which is a list of account records. And then we are simply within the template for each, we are simply traversing or keep on repeating this lightning card code. And here in the JavaScript part, we have used wired approach. In the wire approach, like you can see, I have returned the code once, and in this code I have specified get high revenue account records, then its count, and here to specify the property we cannot use this because we are not using wire, or we cannot even use wire within any method. We have to use or write wire approach within the class directly, not within any method. We have to write it directly, and then rest of the job will be done by Salesforce itself. Salesforce will call it in two situations. First of all, whenever the page loads, and second situation, now let me tell you, second situation is count of records property, this particular property which I am passing in this case. If I am not passing, then there is no case. There is only one situation in which wire will get called. But as we are using here in this situation this property, and we are passing this property, so on change of the value of this property, count of records, automatically the wire will call the apex method again. So here I have written $wire, then the method name, apex method, obviously. And in the second parameter, we have specified the count. This count key, again, it should be as same as the apex method parameter name. If there are multiple parameters, we can specify comma, and then we can specify more parameters. And here, to specify the property, we have to use this kind of special syntax where we have to use dollar and then the property name, which is count of records, which I have defined over here. That's all, right? So here we are not calling the wire again by ourselves, like we haven't written any code to call the wire again. Wire is getting automatically called whenever set count is changing the value of this property, this dot count of records. So that's how wire works. That's the code of wire, and I have already shown you the code of imperative as well. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to Salesforce Hulk for more such insightful content.